So, as I've seen in the chat, people are interested in rat tickling, tunnel handling, cup handling, kind of large scale change management strategy. I'm really hopeful that today's presentation is going to help with that. So we'll go ahead and get started. So as I said, today's webinar is about changing human behavior to advance the 3Rs. My name is Dr. Megan LaFollette, and I'm Program Director here at the North American 3Rs Collaborative. And I'm really excited to be talking about a topic that's not only really important to me, but has really been a passion and an interest of mine from very early on. But I want to check in to make sure and just see where people are at. So first of all, I'd love to see in the chat how many of you have struggled to convince others to make a 3Rs change. I know I have. It can be challenging to get other people on board, to do something that's different. So type yes in the chat. We'll just do a little bit of interaction here at the beginning to kind of get things started and to see where people are at today. So I'm seeing some yeses. Yeah, so hopefully this is helping you feel not alone with this. Environmental enrichment, refinement, etc. One person says no. I would love to hear your secrets after the webinar. So this is very common. So second of all, have you ever personally struggled to make a 3Rs change? Maybe you know something that would be beneficial, that would be helpful, but it's been hard on a personal level. Maybe statistics, if you are a researcher, really doing good experimental design, etc. Does this resonate for anybody that is here today? Again, I'm seeing some yeses. We shouldn't just put the blame on other people. We can also have our own personal struggles with actually doing what we know could be beneficial for refinement, reduction, replacement. Yes, somebody else chimes in on statistics. They can be challenging, but they can be well worth it. So thanks for chiming in. So finally, the third scenario. Maybe you have made that change, but it was really hard. It was time intensive. It was exhausting. Maybe you were like, oof, that was a struggle. I'm not sure how that's going to go in the future. So chime in the chat again if this sounds like you or something you've experienced. Again, seeing some yeses. Again, there's these three kind of areas, personal things. Yeah, and probably it was still worth it. And so that's great to hear. Now, I'm not going to be telling you today that there is a magic silver bullet that's no longer going to make these changes not hard, not time intensive, or not exhausting. There is not a silver bullet when it comes to human behavior change. But I'm hoping that today I can share some lessons about how to make it easier and share some resources as well that I and the collaborative are developing to help with that change. Because I really believe that even though it can be hard, it can be challenging, that it is indeed worth it to make that difference and make that change. So for today, the presentation is going to be in a little bit of 4 parts. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the theory behind human behavior change. We'll talk about what that actually looks like in practice in terms of the 3Rs. And then we'll go over resources from the NA3RC. But before I jump into the content, I do want to give you a little introduction to myself and the North American 3Rs Collaborative, just in case you don't know who I am. So I'm Dr. Megan LaFollette, and you may be wondering, why I am the person giving the talk today. Well, I have a PhD in animal behavior and welfare, and what's unique about my PhD is that it was actually focused on the implementation of animal behavior and welfare strategies. So not just what is best for animal welfare, for specifically research animal welfare, but why do people implement it, why do they not? So I spent, quite a few years of my life really delving into this deeply. And I've also just been really fascinated by real world practical behavior change, but I also haven't always gotten it right. So I can speak from experience, from some things that haven't worked, some things that I've thought about in the past. And I've also, as my role as program director at the North American 3Rs Collaborative, I've learned a lot from people like you who have successfully made changes or who have struggled to make changes in their institutions. And so I'm hoping to give you some of those strategies today. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own journey when thinking about human behavior change in hopes that it might resonate with you and guide today's discussion. So when I was in middle school, I actually became really interested in operant conditioning and positive reinforcement. One of the first books that I read on this topic was called Don't Shoot the Dog by Karen Pryor. I'm assuming that some of you may have read about it. And it talks about these 4 main ways to change behavior with lots of really concrete examples. I thought this sounded great. You reward what you like, you ignore or punish what you don't, behavior changes. But as time went on, especially as I maybe tried to implement some of these strategies with the people in my life, it was not always so simple as just rewarding what I liked and ignoring what I didn't. There's a lot more going on for both our own human behaviors as well as some of our animals' behaviors, our emotional state, our past experiences, what people we know, etc. So I knew there would needed to be something more than this. So then I thought, okay, for people, we can talk to them. So maybe I just need to provide more education. One thing that people may not know about me is one of my first projects and one of my first interests in terms of animal welfare was really focused on positive reinforcement training, specifically with horses, so using reward-based training. So I thought maybe I can just tell people about it and then they will make a change. But if any of you have been in the horse world or maybe train horses yourself, you know that there's a lot of more force-based training. It can work quite well. And so it was very difficult just telling people to change and then getting them to do it. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I just need to provide a positive example. So I was on the equestrian team in university. I worked actually training one of the horses. I used mostly positive reinforcement, and I actually got told by the head trainer, your horse has the best headset on the farm. And what that means is I had trained this horse using these methods that are a little bit more gentle, probably a little bit better for welfare, to carry herself really well. And so I was really positive. Maybe this example is going to make a change. But it really didn't. They were still using the same training methods and still teaching the same training methods as before. So, like many of us, I thought, okay, well, maybe I just need to conduct a really good research study. If I just, really go straight on at why people think they can't use this positive reinforcement, then that will change people. And in particular, what I had heard was, well, I can't use positive reinforcement training with horses because then they will mug me for treats. They will try to kind of bite me, go in my pockets, etc. So I conducted a little study showing that this was not the case. Still, not a lot of change happened. I will say that I was never really quite successful at this university as an undergraduate student trying to tell horse trainers who had been in the field for many years to change their whole equine training program. But this did really spark me to have an interest in understanding why I had not been successful in making these changes and how that I could maybe make a bigger difference in the future. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the theories that I learned in my graduate school a little bit later. The other thing that I've realized is that better science communication in general was really helpful, including how you write, how you present, and how you visualize your data, and that this is critical. And finally, I've also just become more self-reflective over the years. Why do I do the things I do? What led me to the conclusion that I wanted to use this certain types of training? And also, what were the times where I personally may have failed to implement this types of training? And this all helps inform my discussion and my philosophy of change today. So that's a little bit about me. Who is the North American 3Rs Collaborative? This is the organization that I work with. So the North American 3Rs Collaborative was really created by people who understand the challenge of creating widespread 3Rs change and who are passionate about making it and believe that it is worthwhile. We also believe in the importance of the 3Rs generally and the power of collaboration. Collaboration is one of the most critical parts of our organization, and we really believe that we're stronger together with our multitude of different experiences, with our past history in making these changes possible. And our mission really is to advance high quality science and animal welfare through collaborative 3Rs efforts focused on refinement, reduction, and replacement. And this collaboration and this diversity of different institutions can be seen in our leadership team and our board of directors. Hopefully you can appreciate we've got industry, academia, government, other nonprofits, and more. And we actually partner with over 70 institutions, over 150 volunteers to try to make 3Rs change. And of course, there's a lot of change out there to make. There's a lot that we could do, but what we try to focus on is choosing initiatives, choosing particular topics that have strong scientific evidence behind them, will make a big impact, and ultimately are practical in the real world. And we currently have 6 of these focused on rodent health monitoring, microphysiological systems, translational digital biomarkers, refinement, creation of a 3R certification course, and compassion, fatigue, resiliency. And so far, we really do see that there is a big opportunity right now. In our benchmarking surveys, we're seeing that in the United States, less than 10% of institutions are using environmental health monitoring or refined mouse handling exclusively. And we also certainly see this immense potential for new technologies such as microphysiological systems and translational digital biomarkers. Just going to chat to see what's going on. Okay, everything looks good. So that's a little bit about the North American 3Rs Collaborative. Now let's talk a little bit about those theories behind behavior change and what might help when we're thinking about the big picture. I'm actually going to start with a theory that I don't recommend, but one that is really common in our field that is so full of scientists. This is the deficit model of science communication. And this theory says that any inaction, skepticism, or hostility towards change, towards science, towards the 3Rs, is simply due to a lack of understanding related to a lack of communication. You know, it's this thought that if I could just give someone everything that I know, if I could just communicate the results of this studies, give them my experiences, then they would understand and they would change. And that they are just this kind of empty vessel that if I just fill with communication, it'll make a difference. But we know that this isn't quite how it works. Certainly, communication is very important, but it's not everything, and you have to be very careful about how you communicate, how you go about the change in order to make a difference. So one of the theories of behavior change that I have found really helpful when thinking about the 3Rs is called the integrative model of behavior. Previously, this has been called the theory of planned behavior, but there have been a few little updates that I'm going to tell you about today. This is going to be a little bit of a busy slide for me, but I'm going to walk you through this theory using a behavior that's actually not related to the 3Rs, but is probably something that is very easily understandable. Let's just say going to the gym. So we have this behavior that we really want to change. We want to go to the gym. We're probably not going to just randomly drive to the gym. We're probably going to have an intention or a plan to go to the gym. And the more that we plan and the higher our true intentions are to go to the gym, the more likely that that actual behavior is going to occur. In turn, the likelihood of us having that plan, having that intention is impacted by three main things. Our attitudes towards that behavior, whether we think going to the gym is good or bad, if we think it's worthwhile, if we think it's beneficial, etc. Second is our perceived norms. So this is if we think that people around us, people that are important to us, doctors, our friends, our family, etc., expect us to, want us to go to the gym as well. And finally, self-efficacy, which is often also called control beliefs. So this is the thought that and confidence that I can actually go to the gym, that, it's convenient, it's easy to go to the gym. I'm confident that I can go there and do my workout. So these are kind of the big three things that we talk about changing, and I'm going to explain them in a little bit more detail after I go through the rest of this slide. Now, this isn't everything that impacts. These three things are things that we can change, but there are also environmental constraints. So how far the gym is from my house, whether I have money to afford a gym membership, things like this, whether I have a car or transportation to get to the gym, are going to impact my behavior, whether I plan to do it or not. And my skills as well are going to impact the behavior. So whether I actually have the ability to sign up for a gym membership, etc., is going to impact things. And of course, there's also all of these background variables like my demographics, socioeconomic factors, media, past behaviors, and more that are going to impact things. These things are important, but I have them grayed out because they're not necessarily things that we can change. And so if we can't change them, I am going to focus more on the things that we can change. So let's talk about those a little bit more deeply. So when we think about attitudes, as I said, these are your beliefs about a behavior. And your beliefs are really formed from two factors. First is what's called your behavioral beliefs. So this is the belief that if you adopt a behavior, so several people have talked about tunnel handling so far, so I'm going to use that example. So I think that if I start to tunnel handle my mice, then I think that science will be better. I think that animal welfare will be better. I think my work will be easier. I think it will cost more. I think it will cost, or it would take more time. These are what I think is going to happen if I adopt this behavior. And there's a lot of different things we can think about. And then there's this outcome evaluation. This is basically how much I care about these different factors. And this is important to keep in mind that not everybody values the same things the same amounts. So some people are going to place a higher emphasis on the scientific outcomes of something. People are going to think that animal welfare is more important. Some people are just going to care about their day-to-day jobs, how easy it is for them to complete the tasks, or how much money that they are going to need to save, that they're going to need to contribute to the budget. And all of these kind of combine with those holistic beliefs of, yes, generally this is a good thing to do, or it's not really worthwhile. So these are all things that we'll try to change, and I'll talk about more specifics of how to do that in the next part of the presentation. Norms, as I said, are about the expectations or pressures for you to behavior. Just like before, again, thinking about refined handling, we can think about these pressures coming from different individuals. So this might be my colleagues, my peers, my family, my friend, the attending veterinarian, the journals, the funding bodies, the government, leadership, etc. There's all these different potential pressures that we could have placed upon us. And we might have different ideas of who wants me to do this and who doesn't want me to do this. And similar to with the attitudes, there's how much you care about what those people think. So do you care what your colleagues think? Do you think it's really important to do what leadership says? On the flip side, are there people that you don't care as much doing what they do? Kind of thinking about these different people and these different ways to influence these norms can be really beneficial. And overall, these combine again to what you expect, what you want to do by kind of more general categories. Finally is your self-efficacy, and this is really your beliefs about your ability to execute a behavior. So it's easy for me to do it, I'm confident to do it, it's under my control. This factor is really important in the complex research environment. So if you're a technician, maybe you think refined tunnel handling is really good, but you don't get to make those decisions. And so no matter how great you think that interaction is, until you actually give that person the power to do it, you make the approvals, the ethics body, the researchers approve, you're not going to change the actual implementation. And as I both said, this has often been called control beliefs or perceived behavioral control. The other thing that I do want to mention when we're talking about theories of behavior change is cognitive dissonance. This is really important because cognitive dissonance can make it difficult to accept and integrate new knowledge. What cognitive dissonance is it's this uncomfortable feeling of holding two contradictory ideas. And this comes up a lot in 3R's change. Most of us probably have a belief that I'm a good person who makes the right decisions, I conduct high quality science, and I treat animals well. Most of us probably hold that pretty deeply and strongly for ourselves. And then if other people come in and say, actually, you haven't been making the right decisions, you're not conducting high quality science, and you're not treating animals well, cognitive dissonance, I can't hold these two feelings together. And so this dissonance can lead to me rationalizing, seeking confirmation bias, denying the evidence, and defense mechanisms. So this is something to keep in mind. This is something that is normal. This is something that is expected. And it's something that we should be cautious when we are talking about making change, is that it's normal for people to have this response, and it's something to kind of guard against. Okay, so that was the theory portion. I hope that wasn't too dense. We're going to try to actually put this into practice and talk about very specifically for 3R's change, what we can do to make a difference. So first, when we're thinking about attitudes, so whether you think something is good, beneficial, worthwhile, we want to intentionally frame information in a multiple of different ways. So some things that we can think about is who is presenting. Some people are going to respond better for an external person to come in and hearing something from the outside. Having that kind of person from the outside coming in can be really beneficial. Other people are going to have a better response to having internal peers talk to them about something or present something. This is why at the collaborative, we do both. We have panel presentations where we have these external presenters presenting, but we also provide downloadable, editable slide decks so that if you want to help make that change and you want to present internally, you can also do that. We also want to think about modes of communication. So there are verbal presentations, there's web pages, there's peer-reviewed papers, there's white papers, there's posters. There's a lot of different ways that people take in information visually, verbally, reading, etc. And so the more of that we can do, the better. And again, this is something that the collaborative does. We try to focus on these multiple ways of presenting things. Then we want to think about values. We were talking about this earlier. So what does the person value? Do they value science, translation, animal welfare, money, ease of handling, etc.? Again, you're not always going to have 3R's changes that hit all of these. It's not realistic to expect every 3R's change to save money, to improve science, to make better translation. Some of them are going to cost more money, and it's important that if they are, that you be realistic about that up front, that you be transparent. People generally don't want you to sugarcoat things, but it is beneficial if you can talk about the benefits in different ways. And then there's techniques. Again, Working in science, a lot of us want to say that we are rational people, we follow the data, and we follow the evidence. However, if you actually look at research, that's not always how people act. And so even if we say that, humans as a species, we respond not only to the data, we respond to storytelling, quotes, personal examples, etc. So again, you'll see this throughout the collaboratives resources that we provide you these things. And that's where the cognitive dissonance can come in, because there's evidence that says, again, a lot of times we really focus on this rational persuasion, but this is not always effective. Sometimes focusing on inspirational appeals, so, talking about emotions, your values, your aspirations, your ideals, and the positive of things can be more effective. So those are some ideas for attitudes. To change norms, ultimately you want to provide these positive examples from multiple different people in the institution. If you can provide good benchmarking data, that's great. And ultimately, if we can change the status quo, if we can start to actually make this normal, that is going to help. So some of the things that we can do for this, we can have examples of institutions that seem similar to yours or even more challenging. So we often try to highlight both academic and industry of large sizes. We certainly do this in our refined handling efforts. We've got both a large university and a large pharma examples. Similar to this, thinking about the different peoples, so having veterinarians, having a technician, having a researcher, different people that are similar can help that pressure. Having these logos, these quotes, these stories, these presentations, presenting positive benchmarking data when it exists, and then seeking to change the minds of key influencers in the field, so those people that might be important to others, changing regulations, and ultimately changing standards. To change self-efficacy, we really want to think from two angles, both removing the barriers that exist as well as increasing the ease of application. So both releasing the brake and stepping on the accelerator. So some of the things that can help with this is access to training and certification course. Again, that at the collaborative, we try to provide this as much as possible. Always providing appropriate staffing and time, access to help and consultation, easily editable SOPs, so any of the little work that you can do to make it just a little bit easier for people is going to be beneficial. And then generally just this encouragement and these positive examples. So these are some things to really think about when we're thinking about individual behavior change. But of course, we work at large institutions, and so we can't just think about the individual. We also need to think about the institution and this wider view. And usually when we think about the institution, we're also thinking about the individual. It's a back and forth. But now I'm going to talk a little bit about, in practice, what to do at the institutional level. And I do want to highlight this really great article by Natasha Karp and Neil Reevy at AstraZeneca that talk about a really concrete example of how to do this, thinking about sex bias in preclinical research. And they talk about efforts at AstraZeneca and how to do this. I'm not going to go into the specifics of this particular example because it's really well written in the article, but I am going to talk about some of the particular things they discuss in this article. So first of all, there's institutional culture. Your larger culture can either support or hinder change. So culture is really how you do things, values, hierarchies, stories, and rituals. And so thinking at the larger level, does your institution support change generally? Do they support the 3 R's in the vision, mission, strategy, and from leaders? And one of the things that I really encourage institutions is to work to adopt this culture of care. This is something that is gaining momentum here in the United States as well globally. There's been a lot of writings about it. And again, at the collaborative, we're going to have resources on this in our 3R certification course and also embedded in our compassion fatigue resiliency program, because this is important not only for the animals, not only for making change, but also for the people. Overall, so there's a really great article about creating institutional change by an individual who really studies this, who's considered an expert in the field. I can provide this after. I can probably attach it to the email that I send out with the recording. And there's 8 key steps, and these really fit in quite well with that theory of integrated behavior that I talked about earlier. So first is to establish a sense of urgency. We're all really busy. Most of us probably feel pretty maxed out already. And so if we don't feel like something is urgent, that it's something that really needs to be done soon, we're probably not going to do it. And so this can be challenging when we're talking about the 3Rs, but this is also why sometimes people will leverage things like the translation crisis, replication crisis, trying to, expenses, budgets, etc., trying to establish that we need to do this now, that the time is ripe, that there's external pressure, that everything is going this way, can be really beneficial. Second is to create a guiding coalition. Here at the collaborative, we really try to pull from across institutions to help create expert consensus and expert created materials. But within an institution, you want to focus on who has the power to lead this particular change. So this might include senior management, particular researchers, head of animal facilities, chairs of ethical review bodies. Who can actually, so again, if we're thinking about refined mouse handling, tunnel handling, who has the power to help enforce this, to help encourage this, to help lead the change? Who has both influence and real power in the institution? Getting a group together and getting consensus that this is important is going to help. That group can then create a vision of change and key strategies to achieve that vision. This is helping, that every, maybe that vision is that ultimately every mouse in the facility should be handled with refined methods. This can have a picture of the future. It can be desirable, feasible, and focused. And then you do want to communicate that vision with every vehicle possible. There's almost no such thing as too much communication about a topic. This really goes back to communicating in different ways, in different modalities from different people. This is going to really help create the change. That's why, as the collaborative, we've been talking about, say, rodent health monitoring for more than 2 years now. We've presented at over 8, maybe 10 different venues. We're still going to keep talking about it because there's still people out there that we need to reach. And that's going to be the same in your institution, particularly if they're quite large. Then you want to really empower broad-based action. So this is about that self-efficacy. So how can you remove any obstacles to change? What do you need to make difference? Do you need to actually purchase the tunnels? Do you need to provide training? Do you need to provide sanitation procedures, SOPs, etc.? Generating short-term wins is really helpful. So not necessarily trying to start with, we are going to change our entire institution right now to using tunnels. Start small. Start with one team. Start with a feasibility study. Start with animal care staff. Start with your breeding colony. Having this short-term wins of showing this can be done at our institution right now, these are what we've learned from it. This is really going to help create momentum. Once those short-term wins are created, then you can consolidate that and keep going. Once you have shown, okay, we can use this successfully in our breeding colony, maybe we're seeing that actually we're having more pups weaned, we're seeing benefits for time changing, we're seeing mice that are easier to handle, then you can roll it out to another group and then another group. And ultimately, you want to anchor this change in your organizational culture. Is that, how we do things around here, our culture is that we're going to handle mice in the best evidence-based possible way. So those are kind of in practice what something might look like. I hope that was helpful. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about this particular resources that we have to create 3Rs change, which will relate back to both the practice and the theories. We've created a lot of different resources. We've worked together with experts that people have actually successfully made these changes at their institutions to create things for you. I'm going to go initiative by initiative to talk about what these look like. So first, for compassion, fatigue, resiliency, we have a whole resource hub online. This has a lot of reading information. It has webinars, again, by these external experts. It has papers, it has advice, it has consultants, and more. The other thing that we've really worked to do and will be getting online pretty soon is to create really concrete materials to remove those barriers and make it easier for institutions to develop their own compassion, fatigue, resiliency programs. This includes longitudinal surveys so that you can look at your own staff over time. This includes a starter pack, which actually has packets on how do you create a committee, who should be on the committee, what's an example agenda, what's an example charter, budget, downloadable slide decks, advice for managers, and more. There's a whole lot of stuff that we're going to be releasing soon. We also have these interactive webinars. We have posters that you can actually hang in the facilities about this. And like I said, we also have things about culture of care, which is going to be beneficial not only for compassion, fatigue, resiliency, but is going to be beneficial for creating widespread change. And we really think that promoting compassion, fatigue, resiliency is going to help support all your 3Rs efforts, because ultimately you need people to make the change, and we need to support our people so then they can help support the changes. For refinement, we also have a multitude of resources. We've got some high-level evidence-based resource pages that link to more in-depth materials. We also have particularly focused on refined mouse handling. So what we've done is we've hosted and actually run a benchmarking survey based on the theory of planned behavior. So we're looking at those barriers and we're working on materials to address them. We have articles in LAS Pro. We have, again, lots of presentations that you can actually find on our website that you can watch at any time. Again, some of these presentations are from large academic and pharma institutions that have successfully made the change. We're also doing a roundtable at ALAS this year, so you can go ahead and attend that. Also for compassion, fatigue, resiliency, I forgot to say, we're doing a whole session on how to make this change at your institution. And again, we have a downloadable slide deck. Like I said, we have the species page and we've got this mouse handling page. And one thing that I'm really excited about is we're partnering with the NC3Rs to create a refined handling certificate course. Earlier in the chat, someone talked about getting rat tickling implemented, and I have previously created the rat tickling certification course, and I've found that people find that really helpful when implementing rat tickling. It's something easy that they can assign people to watch, they can get certified, etc. We're going to be doing the same thing in conjunction with NC3Rs for refined mouse handling, so tunnel handling and cupping. And then this is an example of our resource page. Again, it really focuses on emphasizing different values of why this can be important: science, animal welfare, ease of handling, job satisfaction, evidence, concerns, and tips. For remote health monitoring, we've created a lot of different resources to help institutions make the switch to environmental health monitoring. So we have an overview page that kind of discusses what your options are and which ones we recommend for you. Again, we've got a ton of presentations. We have a list of the peer-reviewed publications that support it. We have this downloadable editable slide deck. We have SOPs. We have information on doing a cost analysis for your institution and FAQs. We also have a LAS Pro article, and we have a systematic review that's in progress. And again, we have that benchmarking survey. We're again going to be presenting at ALAS and really directly addressing some of those barriers. A lot of people have put out a lot of concern about a particular type of caging. So basically, if you don't have Allentown or Technoplast caging, how do you actually accomplish this? And a lot of our presentations are going to talk about that, as well as how to do this at scale. Again, we're going to have examples of both a large academic and actually a global pharmaceutical company as well about their success in switching over at scale. And I've said this before in my presentations, but I do want to highlight it, that this change is possible and it's helping. We know that as a result of our efforts, that at least 5 institutions have changed, replacing over 8,000 rodents each year. So even though this change can be challenging, we're here to help, and we are making a difference. For microphysiological systems, this is a big replacement initiative. We have presentations to really introduce these systems and accelerate regulatory acceptance. Again, you can find our introductory presentation on our website. Also, if you're a member of the IQ MPS, we've got ongoing organ-focused webinars and workshops, and we're hoping to be able to release those more wide scale in the future. We've got some information on regulatory acceptance, and we're going to have some publications coming out. We also have a technology hub that helps people provide to find providers. This is trying to kind of reduce the barrier of like, okay, I want to use an MPS. Who can I get it from? How do I get started? You can sort by organ type, and we're going to be adding filters. We also have a translational digital biomarkers initiative. This is really focused on non-invasive home cage monitoring technology. And again, we're creating a lot of resources. So one thing I really want to highlight is we have this peer-reviewed manuscript that has a checklist for if I want to implement these, what are the things that I have to think about? It also has a figure of a value proposition, again, thinking about the different attitudes. So why should we implement these technologies? Thinking from an animal welfare standpoint, from a scientific standpoint, from an operational standpoint. This is to help you convince people at your institutions. We're going to be having some educational pages. We have presentation and webinars. Again, we're going to be at ALAS with a roundtable, and we also have a tech hub. Finally, we're creating this kind of wide, broad, virtual, self-paced 3R certification course. We're hoping it's going to be released late 2022 or early 2023. It's taken a little longer than we hoped to put it together. And again, we hope that this is really going to support that broad, wide-scale institutional support for the 3Rs and really support that broad change. Because if more of people at your institutions are really familiar with the 3Rs, they're really committed to it, they've demonstrated their knowledge, they're going to be more likely to get on board with changes. So in conclusion, I know 3Rs change can be challenging, but hopefully today I've told you a little bit about the theories behind human behavior change, in practice, how to apply those theories, and the resources that any 3RC is developing to help you. And we're always looking to develop more things to help, so please don't hesitate to reach out to me with anything that we could be doing. We might not be able to do it right away, but I keep a running list of what would be helpful. To stay tuned on what our resources are, to make sure that, let's say again, you're really trying to push refined handling, you want first access to that certification course, subscribe to our newsletter. Also, just check out our website. We've got a whole lot of resources there. We have regular social media posts that highlight our resources, that highlight the 3Rs. We have a podcast that highlights the 3Rs, that highlight in just 3 minutes once a month, so you can do that. And then finally, I just want to take a moment to really thank our sponsors. Right now, we're a nonprofit that's primarily funded by institutional donations, and we could not create presentations like this, we could not create the resources that we create without the help of these awesome companies. So I want to thank them all for their sponsorship, for their membership, and I would encourage you that if your institution is not on this list, that you encourage them to join. I know all of you here today are passionate about leading the 3Rs change. I know that you already are championing the 3Rs in your work, so please continue to do that. Hopefully you can help use some of the resources. Like I said, encouraging your institution to become a member of the NA3RC, and also becoming an individual donor. Just to run through real quick the benefits of institutional membership, you can be part of our network, you can publicly demonstrate your commitment to the 3Rs, you can really be aligned in this implementation efforts, supporting conferences, webinars, and many of our free resources, and collaborate. And really that collaboration is what makes us strong. Then the last thing that I'm going to mention before I open it up for Q&A is our newest campaign. We actually are just going to be going live with this in a couple weeks, including at ALAS, and this is a $3 for the 3Rs campaign. Although we're primarily funded by institutions, we also know that so many of you individuals, so many people out there want to support the 3Rs in research animal welfare. So what we're asking you to do is to give and donate just $3 each month, so less than that fancy local coffee or not local coffee that you may indulge in probably about once a month, to give that to us, and that we will then pay it forward. If we get 2,000 of those, that can cover another full-time staff member that can help us have 2 more initiatives, maybe one focused on in silico. We're also hoping to put together an in-person 3Rs conference, annual conference. So this can really make a difference. I'll be sending out a link to donate with the recording. And with that, I'm just gonna leave with, encouraging you to visit our website, to email me, to ask any questions, and then open it up for questions today. I'd love to hear, what has today's presentation brought up? What change are you working on in your work? You can either type it in the Q&A, type it in the chat. I will check both of those. So I am going to stop sharing so I can come back and look at those. Thank you all for attending today. I hope you learned something, and I hope it will support your change. Again, you are welcome to either put questions in the Q&A or in the chat. There's a lot of important work to be done out there. We're always trying to make more resources to help you guys with your work. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and type my email directly in the chat. See the thank yous running in. It's always a pleasure to give this presentation. This is a new one for me, but it has been fun. Okay, so I've got my first question is, can you recommend any resources that combine the 3Rs with wildlife or fisheries research? So I actually can. On our website, you can actually, under our 3Rs resources, you will see, I'm just pulling it up right now. I want to put the link in the chat. You will see that there's a really great resource. We don't do it ourselves. Our focus is a little bit more on the laboratory animals. But there's this really great resource. I just put it in the chat. It's 3rswildlife.info, and it has a whole site that's just about wildlife research. And so it's got peer-reviewed studies of non-lethal, non-invasive methods. It's really the first of its kind. And just so that everybody knows where you can find that on our website, this is our website live today. You can always look under 3Rs resources. We generally categorize them by type of R. So if you're looking about refinement, you can see our species pages. This one is going to link you to that other website. We also have particular resources for different species. We've got dedicated pages for that refined mouse handling. We've got reduction resources, replacement. We have our whole compassion fatigue hub. You have our newsletters, our podcast, funding. Like I said, you can always subscribe to our newsletter. etc. And yeah, as somebody said, change can be slow, but it can be really well worth it. Yeah, it is. It is both theory, it's a lot of psychology, but mostly I'm hoping a lot of you, what I said, it makes sense. You might just needed to stop, take a step back and think about it of, it's not always effective to just present the data. One thing as well that I'll add is that one thing that I've really kind of changed my mind on, that I've changed our philosophy on, is it's really common in scientific research to lead with the problem, to lead with these are all the things wrong right now, and that's why you need to change, but that can really activate that cognitive dissonance and bias. So we encourage you to sometimes lead with the opportunity to not put people on the defensive. I've got a few more questions. So what kind of advice/resource do you have for dealing with non-compliance on animal welfare issues by researchers who want to put their research above welfare? Definitely not a great situation. So I don't have any resources that I can think of on the top of my head. That would be something that the institutional review boards would really need to think about that. I'm also going to reach out to my networks to follow up on that question. I'm going to put it in my notes to make sure I can give you some references for that. Melissa yes, so asked about, can you pass along specific scheduling information for your talks and discussions at ALAS? So yes, I would be happy to do that. We're actually planning on, if you are subscribed to our newsletter, which I will put a link in the chat, we're going to have an ALAS focused newsletter that highlights all of our different presentations at ALAS. I will also list them off. So first of all, on Sunday, actually at the ASLAP symposium or event, I'm going to be talking about rat tickling. On Tuesday at 12:30, we have our translational digital biomarkers panel. At Tuesday at 2:45 p.m., we have our environmental health monitoring session. At Wednesday at 2:45 p.m., we have our Compassion Fatigue Resilience session. And last but not least, but Thursday at 12:30 p.m., we have our Refined Mouse Handling Roundtable. So those are what we're doing at ALAS. The other thing that I'm excited to announce, although we haven't completely nailed down a venue, is that we're going to be hosting a reception for anyone who's interested in the North American 3Rs Collaborative, who wants to network with other 3Rs professionals. That's going to be on Monday, likely from 5 to 7 p.m. Again, sign up for our newsletter so that you can get access to that reception. Yes, I've got someone saying that they're glad that they were able to take advantage of the institutional membership and partnership. They're looking forward to the resources and programs, and they appreciate the presentation. Also have a question about how you phrase to differentiate between presenting a problem and an opportunity. So one thing that some of you may have noticed is that some of the literature previously talks about non-aversive mouse handling. And actually our survey talks about non-adversive mouse handling to refer to the methods of tunnel handling and cup handling. And at first we were like, yeah, this is great. This is accurate. We are non-aversively handling mice. But this really emphasizes the problem right now. This sometimes puts people on the defensive because the first thing that they hear when they hear that is like, oh, so you're telling me that I've been handling mice aversively for the last 20 years, but I'm a good person who takes care of animals, who cares about what animals feel. And this activates the cognitive dissonance. This can be really challenging. And so we have moved away from that. Again, these things are true. These things are things that we're still going to communicate to people, but it's not going to be something we lead with. So instead of leading with non-aversive handling, we now try to lead with refined mouse handling. This emphasizes not all the things that people have been doing wrong, all the problems, but the opportunity of improving the mouse handling. So that's a little bit of an example of the difference between presenting something just as a problem, really focusing on the negative, versus as the opportunity. What's the difference between the North American vision and the British one on 3Rs commitments? So we are indeed separate from the NC3Rs. We are the North American 3Rs Collaborative, but we partner closely with the NC3Rs. Vicki Robinson is an ad hoc board member and has been a mentor to me personally. So we really try to make sure that we are generally aligned, but not duplicating our efforts. So for example, for the NC3Rs, they have been working really hard in the UK to get refined handling into institutions. They've been successful with getting it into over 60% of institutions exclusively, but now we're seeing that we need some concerted effort here in the United States to push refined handling forward. So when we're partnering with them, for example, on the refined mouse handling certification, we're going to make sure that we're using terminology and examples that are really thoughtful of both groups of individuals, not just focused on the UK. But generally, when we're talking about the 3Rs, we're quite aligned with how the NC3Rs views the 3Rs. Again, we just try to not duplicate. So some of our efforts that are really unique from the NC3Rs is that we have our compassion fatigue resiliency initiative that's just focused on compassion fatigue resiliency. Our environmental health monitoring initiative is quite unique. Our translational digital biomarkers is a little bit different. And for us, for our microphysiological systems initiatives, we're specifically focused on commercially available technology providers, which is a little different than some of the NPS groups out there. So again, lots of alignment, lots of overlap. We certainly work together to lift up the 3Rs, but we also try to do what is most important and what needs more work done here in North America. If anyone has any further questions, I'm happy to take them. Yes, glad. Been really wonderful to see just how many people registered for today's workshop as well as signed in line. In live. That's been really encouraging. I'm really hopeful to see how the 3Rs gets more implementation. I think now more than ever, considering just the public discourse about animal research, that the 3Rs are incredibly important for us all to implement, for us all to work towards, but that we are going to make more progress faster if we do it together. So with that, if I don't see any more questions, I am going to sign off a couple minutes early. If you know me, you know that I like to keep to time and I like to give people a few extra minutes in their day. I know we are all so busy. So thank you again for logging on. I hope you found this useful and I hope you engage with us further. Again, signing up for our newsletter, donating personally, $3 a month makes a big difference, individually as well as institutionally. And thank you all for what you do and all the hard work that you do on the ground to make these changes happen for yourself personally and at your institution. Okay, thank you again, everyone. Have a great day and see you later. Bye.